appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Global Atheist News Review. And we're all assembled here. We've got representatives from hither and thither, starting with Guy Otten, who's in northern England. Then we go to Kentucky for Frank Lovell, Tennessee for Dr. Ty Wells, British Columbia for D.P. Higgs, Dread Higgs, and Manhattan, New York for David Orenstein. Thanks for coming, guys.
I'm from hither. I don't know about any of you hither people.
I've been hithered.
Well, I can't top that. So I'm going to just plunge in to the first item of news. Now, as we know, a lot of these stories rumble on. They don't just stop at the end of 1 week. There's follow-up things happening. And of course, the follow-up thing at the moment is the nationwide protests in Iran, following the death in police custody a week or so ago of the 22-year-old Kurdish woman who was detained for failing to wear her hijab correctly and then allegedly beaten by the police and ultimately died, which they claim is for underlying health reasons, but countless Iranians believe she died as a result of police treatment, and they're protesting. They're saying that if they don't act now, the next victim could be themselves. And so far, something like 35 people, it's probably gone up since that news came in, have been killed in the protests, which are hitting off in every city of Iran. What do you guys think of that?
Well, it's good that they're not putting up with it, that they're actually starting to speak out on this. It's unfortunate that, it has to lead to so much violence. But the protest, that's the positive thing, certainly, to start speaking up.
Absolutely. 43 years they've been under the thumb of the mullahs' rule.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about that is that, when you've got a dictatorial regime, the people are unhappy, they start protesting, they get repressed. But at some point, the rottenness and the lack of support of that regime will lead to its collapse. And we just hope it's sooner for the sake of the people of Iran than later.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the different thing about this particular protest, because there have been a few other protests in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran, but this is different because it's the women. This is a woman's protest, and it's different too because the men are supporting them, which is so anti-Islamic. Surely something must come out of this.
Yeah. I understand that they're actually burning their hijabs in the streets.
Yeah.
So glorious. It's like burning bras back in the suffragettes, right?
Yeah.
No, I think it's amazing, and I throw my full support behind it.
Yeah, but there's a difference, isn't there? Because burning bras was not illegal. Whereas burning your hijab,
you're right.
Is illegal.
But it's just the symbol, it's on par in the symbolic quest for freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had demonstrations in English cities.
Yeah.
I don't know whether these happening in the States and elsewhere, but in English City, in Manchester, including my area, there was a demonstration of several hundred Iranian people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we do have quite a substantial Iranian expat community, many of whom are refugees and have got asylum from that regime.
Yeah, well, the women have been more oppressed than the rest of the population because they've been forbidden from dancing and singing, even,
Of course.
which is pretty extreme.
Crazy.
Isn't
Yeah.
Well, I'm not
Yeah.
blind to the oppression, systematic oppression, institutionalized oppression that women receive in Islamic cultures. I also want to note that it's a spectrum, because there's definitely women that choose to wear the hijab, and it's not seen as a sign of oppression for them. My sister's from Pakistan, and when she wears her hijab, it is not like she's saying, "Oh, I have to do this because I'm afraid." She's choosing to do it, and she wasn't even brought up in a household where
Yeah.
that was like culturally a thing that we did.
Yeah.
And just want to make that note in the sense of, if you see people wearing hijab, it's not immediately your first thought should be, "Oh, that's a person who's oppressed who needs army liberation." That could largely just be someone who's choosing to do it, which should show two things. One, it's not necessarily connected to each other, right? Like the iconography of is that the right word? The symbolic nature of Islam and the people who choose to like represent it.
Iconography.
There you go. I like it. And then second, it could get so deep ingrained into identity that people will choose to wear the things that can bolster the confidence of other people who would choose to oppress women or stuff like that. So it's a very nuanced issue.
Yeah. Well, of course, women are entitled to wear a scarf if they want to.
Sorry. My sister made a good analogy where she's just like, you're choosing to wear trousers, right?
Yes.
I'm saying trousers specifically because I think that means underwear in European terms.
Pants means underwear. Yes.
If you just walked around without trousers, both in the pants and the underwear sense, that would be untoward to you. So like, I understand that. Like it's all cultural in a sense.
The thing is, for example, here in Sussex, my daughter, who was 15 yesterday, I remember her telling me that her friend, when she was I think this is 3 years ago, when she was still at primary school, her friend was now wearing her hijab. And she was a girl of about 10 at the time, maybe 11. And the thing is, you see, these still children are gaslighted into thinking that if they don't wear the hijab, they're going to be regarded as whores by the rest of the population. That's coercion.
Yes.
Yep.
My own impression about the current riots is that these things tend to have, especially in Iran, and a bit of an elliptical orbit. There's a trigger. There's all of this social disobedience, and then it sort of fades a little bit until the next trigger. I think the big question is going to be, what is going to be the trigger that really does, if not topple the religious authorities, at least move them into quote unquote liberalizing the society where these triggers won't be necessary anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, let's hope so.
I was listening actually to Sam Harris's podcast yesterday. His latest one was with Yasmin Muhammad, who wrote a book called Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. And her tale is, a sad one for sure. She was raised in a secular family, but after the divorce of her parents, she went to live with her mom, who then was essentially looking for someone to take care of her, became the second concurrent wife of a staunch Muslim. And her whole thing changed, her whole entire life. Her mother's life changed. And of course, her daughter had to suffer the change as well, short of the genital mutilation. She suffered for years and years and years. So,
but now she lives in Canada. Or
she does. She's actually, Vancouver, as I understand. So,
she's escaped because it was a forced marriage.
Yep.
It was a terrible story, and I have interviewed her, and I will put a link to the show when she came on as a guest. So, yes, who was it? Guy, you said about its kicking off in the UK as well, because we've had a demonstration outside the Iranian embassy in London, and several police officers were injured by missiles that were thrown at them. And 5 of them were injured. There were 12 arrests made, but the protesters were chanting "Death to the Islamic Republic" and were waving Iran's pre-revolutionary national flag, the Persian flag from 43 years ago. So this is getting to be global.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to Leicester, here in the Midlands of the UK, where we talked a bit about this. Those of you who were on the panel last week, there was a cricket match in Dubai between Pakistan and India. Cricket in the subcontinent is a very passionate affair, and the outcome of this was the 2 communities in Leicester, one is Hindu and the other one is Muslim. The youths started attacking each other in the streets. So 47 people have been arrested. The youngest was 15 and the oldest was 69. Major disorder for Leicester. And it's all over a politicized cricket match, because Hindu religion used to be quite placid, but the new Prime Minister of India he's weaponized it, hasn't he? Narendra Modi has he's done what unfortunately is the current trend in politics. He's done popularism. So he's divided the nation into with me and against me, and he's condoned some youthful Hindu victimization of Muslims. And this is also spreading to poor old England.
Yeah, I mean, it's very sad because Leicester was a place which was noted for its good community relations between different minority groups. And of course, there are black people and there are white people as well.
Also, there's other kinds.
Shouldn't forget, it's not just Muslims and Hindus.
No.
But and now they realize that they've been a bit complacent, because when this tension came along, the community leaders had to immediately sort of get working to.
They didn't have a contingency plan?
I don't think they did. I think they were possibly a bit complacent about it.
Right.
From what I've heard them say themselves.
You don't have that problem with cricket disputes in the US, guys, do you?
No, we argue about football.
Yeah.
We do have issues with grasshoppers, though. That's a big issue.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Interestingly, if you are into cricket, England has just beaten Pakistan in the 2020 competition, 4 games to 3. So that's hot news. That's just breaking that now.
All right. So should we expect riots by Pakistanis in many of our cities? Is the question.
Who knows? Yeah. It's all very regrettable.
It is interesting sociologically, because if there are no riots, it shows what colonialism means. Going after somebody who's, I live next door to, and I have a traditional hate relationship with, is easier than going after my former colonial oppressors.
Well, there you go. So, and you're also right about headscarves being increasingly contentious issue, even in the UK, because this time it wasn't an Iranian, but a Pakistani female minister in London.
Right.
She was harassed for not wearing a headscarf. She's going, it's London. You women can go about with just hair. They don't have to cover it up.
Right.
But there's Pakistanis in London too, and it's almost a mob that she's suffering from, because they're walking beside her with loud hailers, shouting, and I can't understand this particular dialect of what they speak in Pakistani, but I'm guessing that it's whore, you know, and
right.
we don't need that sort of thing, I'm afraid. Okay, to the United States.
Yeah.
Where there's been a consultation between the various Catholic dioceses as part of Pope Francis's Synod on Synodality. Not quite sure what synodality is, but there's been this consultation, and the outcome of it has been summarized and sent to the Vatican for approval or something. And it reveals that Catholics in the United States are deeply divided over issues as disparate as LGBTQ inclusion, clerical sexual abuse, and celebrating the liturgy. So come on, you Americans.
Well, I mean, I think what it shows is this is in a big part of what it means to live in a secular society where you can, be religious, but also believe in freedom. The problem is that when you have people who are in crisis because their religious beliefs conflict with the church, what it should do is make you think real hard and fast about your support of these organizations that are anti-democratic and anti-LGBT and anti-women and things like that. But just like there are people who are trying to still fit religion and science into some type of basket so they can feel good about these things, there are people who will try to fit their religious faith and a whole bunch of secular issues into it's this schizophrenia almost. But on a good note, you've got evolution accepted by more than 50% of the people in the United States now, which is also a very, very good thing. And religion is waning. And so I think you'll see more and more of these conflicts. Those who are religious will get louder because they need to scream louder because people are paying attention. But anyway,
very true.
And that's something we've discussed on other shows as well. Is that it seems like that last fit as the dying whale. They're this is the last gulp of air before they sink into the sea, right?
I feel like it's not so much the last gap. I feel like it's just a big spiral, and we're gonna see them be like, ah, and then they're gonna go away for a little bit, and then wait for it. Oh, we're back again. We're still drowning. And eventually, you give it enough times, they'll come down. So the aliens come, and then they bring their religion, and then
it's like matter spiraling into a black hole. It's the final accretion disk before they're spaghettified.
It seems to me that what they're trying to do is fit a square peg into a round hole, because they're living in the US of A, where pretty much in the right part of the US of A, pretty much anything goes.
I was going to say there's a lot of things that religious people know about fitting pegs into holes, but I didn't know what kind of nature we're talking about.
But usually they're evangelicals.
Now you mentioned you got an item on the news about 3/4 of Republican evangelicals who want to declare the U.S. a Christian nation. But the good news is that 1 out of 4 of Republican evangelicals don't want to do that. And I think that's noteworthy because that's a bigger number than I would have thought. So there is some movement even among the religious who recognize what religious liberty really means. And that calling a nation nation, religion X, is inviting a disenfranchisement of religion Y and Z.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you, Frank, about because David brought up evolution is accepted by 60% of the US overall population.
52 in
the
last.
I frequently have to remind my creationist friends that an awful lot of religious people who believe in a creator God also do accept the historical reality of evolution phenomena. You know, and so even among those that you would say are creationists, there are creationists who do accept that the Earth's 4 or 5 billion years old.
Yeah.
And that species have diversified by way of current evolution thinking. So we're not alone on that. I mean, atheists have the support of a lot of religious folks with respect to that. But we here in Kentucky, we've got a creation museum and an art park that we give tax breaks to. The state of Kentucky does that, so they'll bring in people into the state of Kentucky. And a lot of us are not happy about that part of it.
I wondered about, because you've got contacts, haven't you, in the creationist field there, or at least you've got a journalist who's against the Ark Park and the
Ark Park.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that exist? Oh, someone copyright that. That's a brilliant one.
Well, I wondered if there was any visible trend of, you know, falling off of visitors to those attractions.
Well, there is. The Ark Park is not being attended anything like predictions, like they predicted.
Right.
It's dropping off considerably from their hopes, and they're trying some new things to try to raise big bucks so they can build like a Tower of Babel. They want to do one of those on the same campus that they've got the Ark Park.
They're actually, it's called Noah's Ark 2. They're making another boat. It's made out of steel, and it's going to be twice as big, and it's going to be able to fill up with candy and animals. They're really hoping it'll hold up to water.
They're trying. They are trying.
Wow.
But if they build this Tower of Babel, I mean, if no one understands each other, how is it ever going to get built?
Yeah. I'm boggling over here.
Is it I'm sorry, but is it frustrating to anyone aside from atheists that when they reach one situation that is a cost sink, they are thinking, oh, well, you know, it's a good idea building the thing that in the Bible was destroyed by God due to hubris. Like you would think that a Christian would know that would be a bad idea, but why does an atheist have to bring that up?
Why tempt the Lord your God?
What they should have around the Ark itself, the Ark building, is a huge sea with bodies floating everywhere.
Exactly. And the stench of dead animals.
Yes.
Yeah, if they told the truth, that's how that would look.
That's what they do. So staying in the US, but moving over to Arizona. I didn't realize it, but Arizona wasn't a state of the US until probably about 100 years ago. And prior to their statehood, they had a ban on nearly all abortions. And now that, obviously when they were a member of the state, they had to abide by the federal judgments. But now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, they're saying we can go back to our original laws when we were Arizona as a country. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Well, nothing like going back to 1912 to live your life, you know. It's a lot simpler when, you know, women don't have the right to vote. Brown and black people, you know, don't have their civil rights. You know, it's so much easier for to be controlled, you know.
Barbers or dentists.
Right.
So much easier for bigots.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And great distinction, because that's one of the main things I always bring up when people are like, there's slavery in the Bible. It's like, yeah, but it was okay back then. Everyone was fine with it. I'm like, not for the slaves.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
for the people who write the Bible, yeah. It was easier for the bigots.
Yeah. Same with
Not
women,
a word
right?
from Christ about slavery being bad too, you know. In all of the of all of the liturgies, all of the writings, you know, no mention of don't do that.
No. That wasn't something he disapproved of, apparently.
Right.
Okay. Well, as Frank said, there's Pew Research has been at it again. And you remember, those of you who were in the panel last week, we reported that the US could lose its Christian majority by 2070. It's not soon enough, in my view, but that's the trend, apparently. So as Frank said, 70% of Americans actually accept that the US Constitution would not allow the government to declare the states to be a Christian nation. But 2/3 of Americans said, it's only 2/3 of Americans said they opposed the idea of the US becoming a Christian nation. The rest of them, and that's of Republicans, that's 61% of Republicans, they said they favor the US officially declaring itself to be a Christian nation.
Fortunately, that's not enough to make it happen, but that's still scary. That's a big number.
And is this a pew 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 poll, or because I kind of question that, like, how big is the cohort that they're sampling there? You know, like how do they know these things? Like,
well,
I don't know. It just seems a little arbitrary.
Well, they are a very respected polling organization. It's very likely that they've got a large enough cohort to a demographic to, represent the whole population.
The Pew Research folks, which are religious folks, are pretty honest. They don't seem to be reluctant to tell the story that works against them if that's what their data show.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope we can trust them.
Better than any other organization on the religious side that I can think of, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, there's the Barner group, BARNER, and they do a lot of religious polling as well, especially of evangelicals, and they've been pretty honest too, suggesting that there is a crisis for those who are of deep faith in the United States because of where the trends are going. And they're a very religious organization.
Right.
Yes. And on the subject of trend, of course, it's the older Americans who have the nationalism, Christian nationalism view, whereas the younger Americans, the even younger Republican voting Americans under 30, do not feel like that. And so for a member of the political party Republican, the worry is that if you go down that route, you're going to turn off the next cohort of your own electors.
Yeah, and that's certainly where that kind of that kind of additional information is important. Instead of just saying 70% of Americans are Christian. Well, again, you can break that down into different demographics. You can break that down into people who identify as Christian without going to church. I mean, there's a lot of nuance that could be parsed in that information that I think is lost in just a general.
Yeah, it isn't just a single figure, is it?
Yeah.
No.
And I think there's an element of backfire in this too. The quote unquote victory over Roe v. Wade may come back and bite the Republicans simply because that has energized people about, what next could possibly be on the chopping block and what that means for voting.
And it may also rally people to get to establish something much more solid in even as an amendment to the Constitution regarding a woman's bodily autonomy.
Exactly.
Roe versus Wade was weak legislation, and it was really just waiting for something like this to happen. So it's an opportunity. It could be seen as an opportunity by those who support women's rights to get this thing established as an amendment to the Constitution.
The only problem is it's a tough hill to climb.
Of course it is right now.
2/3 of the Congress and 3/4 of the states have to agree to have an amendment. But I'm hoping that we get to that.
Sure. And even some Supreme Court reforms, like adding additional seats, I know has been explored in order to kind of dilute the power of any one side with respect to how much influence a small majority can exert on the entire Supreme Court.
Well,
a minority.
In the U.S., it's called an activist Supreme Court if the activism doesn't meet your political ideal. Usually that's what, when you're on the right, you're blaming the Supreme Court as being activist for keeping up with modernity. And now, of course, that you have this swing to the right, you find no one on the who are right or center or the RNC are saying that this is an activist court anymore.
Right.
Well, on the subject of Republican governors and senators and other members of the governing body, there's U.S. Senator James Lankford, who is a Republican from Oklahoma, and he has been speaking to Christian nationalist Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council, and he was telling how, up until recently, they were experiencing a massive drought in Oklahoma, but the week after the state passed their anti-abortion legislation, we had the most overwhelming rainstorm. He's thinking that, God done it, because as a payment, a reward for preventing abortions. I don't know where these people are coming from.
Well, they don't study logic, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, guys, I want to finish today by showing you a clip. This has to be seen to be believed. Take a look at this.
I've seen things in visits to heaven. People say, you visited heaven? Yes, 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 yes. Not as much as some, but I have. One day, I stepped over into there, and I walked out, and it's the first time I'd ever seen this in my whole life. It was a valley. And then this mist rose up out of this valley. And then the next thing I saw really took me back. Because, you saw it when you didn't plan on it happening. You were there. I didn't expect, I didn't say, okay, now I'm going to go into this valley and I'm going to look at this. I'm just there. And then suddenly this mist comes up and I'm watching it. And then this giant looking head of this dinosaur thing stood up in this valley. And it was not dangerous. And this was the valley. The Lord said, this is where they live here. I came out of that room stunned. But it doesn't make any difference who believes what. I was the one that was there.
How about that?
Hanging out with the dinosaurs, eh?
Well, do dinosaurs have souls then? So if maybe all animals have souls,
Now
they all can go to heaven.
Now, as a fellow dinosaur nerd, I'd be really interested in finding out which dinosaur he thought he actually saw, because a lot of things people call dinosaurs are actually not technically dinosaurs. So he's like, "Oh, it was a triceratops." I'm like, "No, that's a giant lizard." Try again. It was a velociraptor. It's like, "Nope, that's a Jurassic Park Frankenstein monster." It was put together. Didn't actually. It was like a completely different size. The Ankylosaurus. There you go. Maybe there's some credence to the story after all.
It reminds me of the chat we had this afternoon, Ty, when we were talking about the fakery that films, movies can show people, and some people can't distinguish very well. And this guy is obviously trading on that.
There we go. Yeah, not only trading in it, but betting into it to hopefully get his masses to also buy into it too. That's the danger behind this stuff.
That in oh my God, no!
Oh no! You shocked me. Yeah, the whole thing is gullibility doesn't happen in a vacuum. It seems to spread, and it's very difficult to contain.
Right. No, you just got to up these people's Thorazine and take out the economic value of leading people to believe magic is real, because that's what it comes down to. These people are doing this because they make a nice buck at it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, John, at some stage we need a story that has a skeleton in it, and another story that has a fertility goddess in it, so that the props in David Orenstein's room can be used.
Also, you want the weird irony behind this is that Christians were not happy when the dinosaur idea was coming out in the first place. I don't know if you guys remember that, but there's very well documented pushback on the idea of, one, a very old world where animals that used to exist weren't around, especially ones as big as dinosaurs, and then two, that humans weren't the best, strongest, coolest things on Earth in the first place, and then three, like, oh, scientists have things that aren't in the Bible. Oh, that's a problem. So like the fact that now we've gone full circle to the point where it's like, not only did dinosaurs exist, but they were in heaven with me. It's such a weird, bizarre.
That's what they call moving the goalposts. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, guys, on that note, and hoping above all hope that David survives his encounter in the next few minutes, I'm going to draw the proceedings to a close.
All righty.
Pray for me.
Yes, we will. Yes.
Moodiness is with you.
Yes, I'll even weave a spell for you, David.
Thank you.
Guys, you've been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
You got it.
Several clergy
Russell was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that guy?